She's based in Toluca Lake. She was born and raised in Los Angeles and has a bachelor's in sociology from the University of California at Santa Barbara. For more than a decade, she worked in the entertainment industry, where she worked on numerous award-winning feature films, television shows, and animation projects. And she had to do very organized work there, and that's what introduced her to the field of organizing. And she realized that she was a natural-born organizer. And she officially began her company in 2003. And her primary focus is residential organizing with an emphasis on seniors, estate planning, financial organizing, and organizing small home-based businesses. She has been featured in several episodes of TLC's The Hoarding Buried Alive TV show, and her organizing tips have been published in the Daily News, Senior Planet, USA Today Weekend, among others. So Sarah and I do a lot of similar things in the organizing field, and we're friends and colleagues from NAPO, the National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals. And I've heard her present this talk twice, and I just think it's such a fascinating subject that we all need to be aware of. And so we're going to start. Welcome, Sarah. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. And can you tell us a little bit more about your path to becoming a professional organizer and how you came to focus on estate planning needs?
My path was kind of unusual. I did come out of entertainment, and I sort of set a bunch of goals and reached a lot of them. A lot of people praised me for my organizational skills. I like the label makers, and I like making files, and all my presentations were really, really well done. But I got to a point where I just felt like I could be doing something else. So I looked for something else. I did my online research, and I found out that there was a whole world out there of people who were organized and actually got paid for it. So that's what led me to organizing. It's a business where you can, specialize in different areas. My focus happens to be senior issues, because I know that our population is aging. I dealt with my parents and their aging process, and I am really finding that that's a really big need right now. People need guidance, especially when the population that's aging didn't grow up with computers, aren't familiar with how to do things online, and they're not real tech savvy. Some of them are, surprisingly enough. I've got an Instagram influencer as a client, but I've also got, people who want to write checks to absolutely everyone and don't want to pay any bills online. So that's basically it.
How you got there? Good. Can you describe for our listeners what exactly a digital asset is?
Sure. A digital asset is anything that you have that is online, whether it's your bank account, a financial account, a Facebook account, if you've got photos online, if you've got a blog that you keep, any account that you have online, if it's got a username and a password, then it's a digital asset. And it technically has your name on it, but it doesn't always belong to you.
Can you tell us a little bit more about who it belongs to? Uh-oh, she froze.
Well, there is whenever we sign up for these services, there is a terms of agreement that we quote unquote sign. It's a little box that we check that says, I agree. A lot of us gloss through all that legalese, and a lot of it has to do with who owns what. In the case of, let's say, Facebook owns your posts, whether you like it or not. If you don't like it, then you don't have to use Facebook. But part of the price of going onto Facebook and it being free is that they get to use your information. And that means using your friends' information. That means using your photos. That means using any kind of information that you're putting out to them, whether you're married, whether you're single, what you do for a living, when your birth date is, and any other information that you might give them as part of your profile or as part of your interactions with others. So that terms of service agreement, basically you're signing away your rights to your stuff. And these terms of agreements, these are always changing. So once in a while, you'll get an email, let's say from PayPal, if you use PayPal, that says, our terms have changed, and they want you to know. They're legally covering themselves by letting you know that they've changed some of the wording and that things are slightly different. But for a lot of these services that you and I are subscribers and we use a lot, like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, a lot of those services, because they're free, we've given over, instead of money, we've given over our rights.
So if it's a paid service, like some of these you can pay to go to an upper level, does that regain the right for you? Uh-oh, she froze again.
You know, it really depends on what it is. There are some paid services, for the most part, I would say that almost anytime you're agreeing to use somebody else's things, you're agreeing to give over your information. Am I freezing up for you, Janet?
Occasionally. MJ, is she freezing for you?
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
Occasionally, but it's okay. Keep going.
Okay.
All right. I apologize if my internet connection isn't very stable, but for the most part, I find that whenever you're agreeing to use somebody's stuff, somebody's website, somebody's content, somebody's platform, that you are giving over your rights. It just depends, and every site is different depending on what it is. It could be a banking site, it can be a social media site, it can be a place where you keep your blog. They're all a little bit different. So it does vary from website to website and service to service.
Okay, good. Who needs to know this information and who does planning for digital assets after death apply to?
Well, actually, I believe that everybody needs to have their digital assets in order. I think that if you really want to get technical about it, and I tend to do this for my clients, I want them to have a digital estate plan. It's what I call their digital life after death. Just like you would with a regular estate plan with an attorney, you can list all your digital assets just like you would list all your financial assets with an estate attorney or a trust attorney. If you are not into planning, you know, you can make it a piece of paper, but have a couple of people that have access to this piece of paper or a secret hiding place where you can tell them, if anything happens to me, I want you to go ahead and take over my digital assets. We can talk about that too. I don't know if I went on to it.
What does that mean? So if something were to happen to me and my kids, do I have to fill out a special paper, a special release that gives them permission? Do I need to tell Facebook and all those social medias in advance, or the online banking in advance? These are the people that are authorized to go into my account, because otherwise they'll shut them down, right?
Yes, eventually they will shut them down, but there are certain things on different places. Facebook has a way of you selecting what happens to your assets. And it's actually in the settings, and you can go there and you can designate that somebody else be the person that controls your account after your death. You can tell them that nobody's allowed to control your account, or you can, you can just let it go. I happened to see today that it was someone's birthday and they've passed, and yet it said it's so-and-so's birthday on Facebook. And I kind of wish their family had taken the account down. If that person had made provisions, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I would hope that they would remember to do that, but a lot of people don't place a lot of importance on Facebook. It's just a fun thing to do. But for the family, I would have advised them to make it part of their estate or trust. And I would have asked them to make a list of all of those websites and memberships. And just like you would for a regular trust, and go ahead and do those things, because every single website varies from the next. Some of them give you control. Some of them will allow you to appoint someone else. And some of them just take it, into their own hands after a certain period of inactivity. So if someone passes, of course, there's going to be inactivity, and they just take it into their own hands.
Do you think
But
some of
it's
the,
really, it's something that I would,
oops.
go right ahead.
Oh, we lost the last few words that you said. It froze.
I was hoping that your kids would have your sort of your game plan in front of them. Knowing you as I do, you have a trust in place, and you have orders in place. You have basically all of this written down, or at least you plan to, and you let everyone know which websites you've subscribed to or are members of, and you have your username and your password and possibly any hints that go along with those logins. All that stuff gets left to your estate and to your executors, and those are the people that can control your digital assets after that.
Do you think that this is getting incorporated into people's financial advance directive or financial power of attorney? I've seen some that they're actually putting those words into the advance directive for financial affairs that specifically says, these people are the trustee or the agent to handle the financial, the banking, and all online accounts. Do you know if the online accounts will accept that as, or it has to be some special document done only online?
Honestly, it varies, because it depends on if you're dealing with a financial institution. All of technology changes so rapidly, and new technology is introduced so rapidly that our laws and even the rules for these financial institutions, they can't keep up with the technology. So it's best to have it as part of a trust or as a directive. And that if you are able to walk into a bank, for example, and say, I have power over this bank account, and here's the legal document that proves such, you are much more likely to get attention from the bank and get their help in accessing funds. And it's the same way with digital assets. If you have something that has a signature on it that's been notarized and is part of a trust agreement, you're much more likely to get help if you've got it in writing and it's legal.
So then someone could take the financial directive and send it in, scan it, send it into Facebook or send it into Twitter and say, here, this was my spouse, this was like my parents' financial directive, and she's passed or he's passed, and now I want to close this account.
Correct, correct. You could do it the old school way. If you have the password and the login and the password, you can act as that person. It's not exactly legal, and I'm not suggesting it. And I am not an attorney, but I am telling you that, as far as a lot of these websites are concerned, you acting as the owner is illegal because you're impersonating that person. So they would much rather you contact as the executor or as the person in charge of the estate and say that you're doing it on that person's behalf. A lot of us have gone in after the fact. When my parents passed, I went in and closed down their Yahoo accounts, for example. I knew their logins, I knew their passwords. I went in knowing that I just didn't want to get any more mail to those, it was all junk mail anyway, but to those accounts. So I acted on their behalf. I don't think I'm going to go to jail for it. I don't think it's a big deal. And it wasn't anything financial. And I know that they put me in charge of all their other affairs. So I would have a leg to stand on. But that is the old school way of going in and acting as the person. The way that a lot of places are looking at it now is you need to have the signatures and you have to have all your I's dotted and T's crossed as you would for a legal document, or any kind of trust, any kind of will, any kind of directive.
Yeah.
Do we have a question from Lynn?
Oh, yes. Lynn, do you want to ask your question? Go ahead and unmute.
Okay, so my question is with email accounts, I mean, email accounts specifically aren't in somebody's trust. So, and if you don't have the password, then how do you, I mean,
That's the problem.
Even if you're executor and all that stuff, legal documents, but it doesn't say this email account is part of my estate, or I don't get that.
That's sort of what I'm urging everybody to do, is make sure that before it's too late, that you do document all those email accounts and all those passwords and all those hints and secret questions, so that it is part of a plan, so that it is part of your final wishes. I worked very closely with someone who was, he called himself the computer guy. And he one day went to a Dodger game and suddenly had a heart attack in the parking lot and died. His kids could not get into his computer. They could not figure out his passwords. They didn't have any access to any of his assets. And I don't think he had anything in place. And it becomes quite a headache for those you leave behind when you don't leave us that information. It's when you make a plan and when you give us a little trail, it's like you're giving a gift to those that you're leaving behind. You're keeping us from going to probate, number one, and you're also keeping us from having a lot of headaches.
So I did have a friend, it's been about 5 years ago, in control of her email account, but what I was told, or her Facebook or whatever it is, that it was stolen. Somebody took her identity, but she was gone. So I don't know how that worked, but and I don't know if her son ever corrected it or not, but that was that I heard about, somebody taking her identity.
So one of the things I would do in a situation like that, Lynn, is if you can get a copy of the death certificate, especially if you're the executor, you're going to have one, and you could just get the address for Yahoo and send it with a copy of, or send the death certificate with the directive that shows that you're the executor, and say, shut down this person's account. I've had a situation like Sarah was describing where a husband died, the wife, and he did all the banking, he did all the financial management for the household. And we had to bring in an IT person to break into the computer because she didn't even know the password to get into the computer. She couldn't get money, she couldn't do it, so Sarah is so right in telling us to, get every password written down, and get this prepared because these things happen all the time.
And if you don't want to write it down, you don't have to. You can use a password service. You can use something like LastPass or 1Password, or there's a bunch of other vaults where you can keep those passwords. As long as you have the one password to 1Password, you can get in. And if you trust it with 2 people that you really trust, then there's a way of someone getting in after you're gone and having some kind of access to your digital assets. Of course, paper works too.
I had a question.
Go ahead, Mayor Coffrey, go ahead.
Well, number one, going back to the privacy thing that you had mentioned earlier, about how they own basically your identity and personal information. How does that coincide with their privacy acts saying that they'll protect your private information when they're the ones who are basically taking it? You know what I mean? That's question number one. Number two, what if someone forgot about an asset or an account? Like what happens? What if they forgot to give like in that guy, the case of the heart attack, like there's no way to prove that you're family member and like you can't get access at all. Like, is there another option? You know what I mean?
Unfortunately, part of your question broke up, but I think I got the gist of it. If you have to prove who you are as in terms of a family member, you should have some documentation. You should have some, if you are in charge of their assets, if you're in charge of their trust or their will, any kind of thing like that, it should be written and documented. Otherwise, it goes to probate, and probate is a whole other ball of wax, which Janet, maybe you'll address in another discussion. But probate is the long way around things. Probate is when you go through the courts so that the courts can legally deem an executor for the assets.
So, but technically, what if someone was like in a will, was vague? Like,
did that make sense?
Yeah. So I guess my next question is, what if someone in their will documented, like they were pretty vague and they said, I give all my assets, like permission for all my assets and everything. And it was just vague, not like every single thing written out.
It won't happen if it's done with the proper attorney. It's very, very specific. Now, a lot of attorneys, as part of a trust, they often hand you a big binder for your trust. And sometimes they even hand it to you on a thumb drive or a flash drive. They are very specific about those things, and they will have you list out, just like you list your bank accounts or your insurance policies. They will have you list all of your digital assets, or, and a lot, I would say more and more attorneys are doing this for their clients now because they realize how many digital assets we all have. And that's becoming a bigger and a bigger problem as we rely more and more on the internet, as we have all these passwords, as somebody needs to control them. Somebody's got to have a grip on them. So I would say that there's not a lot of wiggle room to be vague.
And his first question was with regards to the privacy. I don't know if you heard that question.
Right. the privacy varies from company to company. Basically, what they're trying to keep private is that nobody will hack into their system and gain your information. They don't really care about much else. They just want to protect their own computers. You know, remember, they're running businesses. They're not doing this because they're nice people. They're running businesses. And they're mining our accounts for information. They want to know where we live, what we like, what appeals to us, what we're going to click on. They know what kind of advertisements to put in the margins so that we can see things that appeal to us, whether it's vitamins or shoes or new cars. They know what we're clicking on.
Yeah, that's why when you run a search on a pair of shoes, and then the next day you'll see a bunch of ads for shoes, because they know.
I have
The
a
shoes
question.
just keep following you.
Cynthia has a question.
Yes,
Go
I was wondering if you have, you have an email account and you have a Facebook. Isn't after a while, if you are, like you don't go into the account, would it go away? So you don't really have to do anything?
Depending on what it is, yes, after a while, if they see inactivity, they usually drop it. It's not worth their digital space to keep an account. But it's usually a pretty long time, and it varies from website to website. But if you had an old email account, let's say on Hotmail or something like that, or on Yahoo, after maybe 5 years of inactivity, they will eventually delete the account.
Yeah, because I remember I had a Hotmail account and I didn't use it for a while. And then I said, oh, let me go in, and I couldn't get in. So because I was looking for an
Right.
email that was on the Hotmail, and I went back and there's no way I can get back in. So
And a lot of these companies, like brokerage accounts, they'll change your password every 6 months. Even if you don't change it, they'll make the password inactive for that very reason.
oh.
Right. They don't want you taking up space on their servers. So they're going to drop you if they don't see that it's an active account.
And from what I understand, and maybe you know more of this, once Social Security learns that someone has passed, they quickly, very quickly, and they may learn about it from the mortuary before you've even had 24 hours to process your loss. And they will notify banks, they'll notify a bunch of sources of your money, so that if someone does try to go in online, they're shut down. So that's why it's really important to be prepared.
It's very interesting, and it sort of varies. I noticed that sometimes Social Security definitely knows, and they're hooked into Medicare, so they know. But it sometimes they will notify banks. It just depends on when the death occurred, and how fast it was reported, and how fast the information trickles down. Sometimes the deaths don't get reported. Sometimes people can continue to use the debit cards, the bank accounts, and especially when you're a co-signer on an account. Let's say you have an account with a parent. They're not going to close the account because you're still on it. But if the decedent is the only one on the account, you do run the risk of having that account closed. If it's just in that person's name, if it's not in the trust's name, which is a whole other discussion. But sometimes you find that these things are either on hold, or you'll get a notification that says, like, we've been notified of a recent passing, and condolences, and you get letters, that kind of thing. Other times you have to notify the companies and tell them this person died. They may want you to send in a copy of the death certificate to make sure that you're really telling the truth. Sometimes they want a hard copy. Sometimes they just want to scan. It really depends. Every single company and every single website and internet provider and you name it, they're all different. You really have to take it on a case by case basis. And unfortunately, it's a really time consuming thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's enough that you have to notify when there is a loss. You have to do so many other things, notify, the funeral home, the cemetery, the friends, the relatives, and then to do all this extra work on top. Now, what about, Sarah, if there's money in an account, like a PayPal account or some of these other online payment types of accounts, Stripe or Amazon Prime, if you might have money in an Amazon account. And if the money is not retrieved in 3 years, does it escheat to the state of California like other unclaimed property?
Yes, it does. It will go as unclaimed property and it will turn up in the, is it this state
Controller's office.
Controller's office? Yeah. I was thinking, yeah, it was the state controller's office. So I had something like that happen to me, but it was for my grandmother who passed in the 80s. And I was notified by an institution in Canada that there was something still there. And I had no idea about this. My grandmother moved to California in 1950. So I don't know what assets she had in Canada, but she had something. And they still try and track you down. They don't want to have this money to keep track of. They would much rather get it to the people that earned it or that deserve it or that inherited it. A lot of these financial institutions, like you were saying, PayPal or maybe Zelle, or I shouldn't say Zelle because Zelle is more of a wire service, but Venmo, places where you have some accounts. A lot of times that money will sit in that account and just sit there for a while. They will close your account down if there is an inactivity for several years, because sometimes maybe we infrequently use PayPal. But again, acting on behalf of the estate, you can get in touch with those services and have them relinquish the money to the account. Again, I'm not suggesting this, but if you did go into that account on your own and have the money deposited into the account that's already on file there, I don't think anybody would notice it, if that makes any sense.
So we do have an attorney on the call tonight. It was actually Miss Darren Larson, who some of you heard speak back in February when she was talking about preparing an estate plan. And she also talked about the Proposition 19 that was passed in November that affects property tax. Darren, can you come off of mute? And you are an estate planning attorney. Are you incorporating the words about the social media and the online accounts into the trust verbiage? How are you handling that? Can you shed a little light on that for us?
Yeah, a couple of things that I do routinely is with respect to, while a person is alive, we always make sure that the durable power of attorney has language in it, allowing the agent to address anything with respect to digital assets. And I apologize, Sarah, I came in late, so if you've already covered these things, I didn't hear all of your presentation, but it's important to have it in a power of attorney. That comes in handy while someone's alive, but possibly incapacitated or unavailable to take care of their own things. But once they pass, of course, the power of attorney becomes useless. So I know that there's mixed results with different social media platforms and digital platforms. They all want different things. It depends what state they're based in. I mean, it's kind of all over the board. But I think the and I haven't had this actually happen too often, but the one thing is if there is a provision in the trust, if they have a revocable trust that says that my trust includes all my digital assets, even if it is general, but that it, you can say including but not limited to Facebook, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
The trustee can then go in and sometimes show that and say, I have authority, and it's okay on their end. They'll go, that's good enough. We'll let you do what you need to do.
Correct.
So I would say that just having any reference in the trust can't hurt, and it may help. The other thing I wanted to say too is with respect to these accounts like PayPal or Venmo, where there could be money sitting there kind of in purgatory. If there isn't going to be a probate proceeding, and remember, very few decedents actually have a court supervised probate. There is a procedure called the small estate affidavit, where if it's, a relatively small amount, whoever is the heir or the trustee, if there's a pour over trust, can actually, with an affidavit, go and collect them. And the banking institutions and the related institutions they understand what those are, and they're pretty consistent in accepting those as a way to get the money freed up.
Darren, do you think if someone did their trust and their financial directive years ago, before all this digital stuff became so strong, do you think they need to amend their estate planning to include the digital assets? Or just
it wouldn't be a bad idea. And actually, I'm thinking now as I listen to this, there's some clients I have that do have old trusts that I'm sure have no reference whatsoever. I'm gonna have to go think about that. But I think you could do it with a very simple one-page amendment that just says, I'm amending my trust to include, my digital assets, and I intend that my trustee have full access, that kind of thing. Probably work.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, back to Sarah.
Darren, thank you for your input. I appreciate it. And you can list them individually, or you can have a blanket statement like Darren was talking about. And, depending on who your attorney is and how specific they're going to get, it's really up to you whether a lot of those companies, they don't want to tangle with somebody who's saying like, here, I have a document that says I'm in charge of the assets. They're going to say, okay, since you presented it, okay, we'll honor it. But the more specific you can get, the better off you're going to be, I always think. But of course, I'm an organizer, so I like that.
I know that I've had a client we've had to file a lot of papers to get unclaimed property, and the wife is the power of attorney, or was the power of attorney over the husband because he had severe Alzheimer's. Well, we had to produce a letter from a doctor that said he was a patient, an Alzheimer's patient, and and we had to send that in with the power of attorney. So when you have to go, we hope that you get all your preparations done beforehand, because when you have to get that money from the unclaimed property division of the controller's office, there's a lot of paperwork that you have to file sometimes. And with the COVID, I'm seeing people waiting 6 months now trying to get some of that money. So it is a long process. So dealing with this beforehand is really, really important. Sarah, what criteria would you recommend that someone consider when choosing a digital executor? Should they be the same person that's the executor handling the rest of their trust? Should it be a different person?
I think it's really different for everyone. Your executor is obviously somebody that you trust very much. And whether that person is tech savvy or not, you've got to decide if that person's going to really take your best interest to heart when it comes to your digital assets. If you are talking about a spouse and you're both, retirees, then maybe it's not your spouse. Maybe it's a son or a daughter or a younger cousin or an attorney or somebody who you trust with your digital assets, and maybe you don't want to lump all of that responsibility onto just one person. Maybe you want to give one person the actual duties, and then you have a separate executor for your trust, for your digital assets, and one for your trust. It's really up to you. You know your friends, you know your family, you know who you trust, and it's you know, I can't tell you what the perfect situation is. You've got to feel comfortable with that person, because that person is going to be doing the work for you after you're gone.
Can you tell us if you've had any of your clients pass away in your experience in closing their digital accounts?
Yes, I have. I mentioned earlier about closing my parents' email accounts. They were not big on online activity. They did not have social media accounts or anything like that. But I do have a couple of clients where the husband passed and they did not have any idea about their presence online. And we were basically left with no recourse, no direction, and no nothing. So there's not a lot we can do. The things that we could control were things like banking, investments, insurance, and that kind of stuff. We had a lot of changes in the banking. We let the banks know that we needed to change over so that the online banking could now be done by just the spouse and not by the husband. We let them know about things like frequent flyer miles and having access to those kinds of things. And it's really amazing to me that these spouses were married for so long, yet one spouse handled most of the banking or most of the financials, and the other person didn't really know much about it and didn't have a clue as to how to access it either. So sometimes when I come into a situation, we're starting from square one. I have to say, like, how many bank accounts do you have? How many insurance, policies do you have? We need to list those things. We need to have an idea of how many credit cards you have. And sometimes we find things that even the spouses didn't know about. We find hidden accounts, and things that they had no idea about. It's like a little bit of a treasure hunt, or as I like to sometimes call it, an archaeological dig. You never know what you're going to find.
That's what I love about this. Yeah.
No, go right ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so Sarah and I do similar things like this, and it's like a detective. I feel like I'm a detective, going through their papers. Oh, you have this. I don't know. I know. So we have to get on the phone and we have to call the brokerage accounts and the insurance companies, and we have to get these files all organized so that their trustees and executors will know what is the current life insurance policy and everything. You mentioned something, credit cards. If people, as the people get older and they're not out spending as much or traveling as much, one of the things I like to do with the older clients is actually cancel some of those credit cards to reduce their liability, that if their wallet were stolen, or those cards were stolen, that they're not so exposed out there for $50,000, $60,000 because if they're not remembering what their credit cards are, then they're going to have a really hard time coming home and counseling those. So I try to reduce their exposure by reducing some of the amount of credit cards and credit limits that they have.
I think that's a wise decision. I think it really makes things simple, especially if their cognitive abilities are starting to decline. Right. If maybe they only need 1 or 2 credit cards, right. Maybe one is fine and a debit card is fine. And it, you know, that's a whole other discussion about, you know, getting into observing somebody else's financials and their spending habits. But it makes it a whole lot easier for those that you leave behind if you're not leaving them with dozens and dozens of credit cards to follow up with.
Right. And if any of you are helping a senior parent, you might know about this. There's a True Link card. Do you know about the True Link? Or any of these cards where you can put money onto a card and let the senior have that card, so that if it's lost, okay, they lost $100 maybe on the card, but they didn't get a $10,000 fraud charge. So there's, you know, you could preload these cards and let your this you know, if you have a person that's 80, 90 years old, a parent or something, that's a way to give them money, but yet limit exposure.
Right.
I have a question.
Okay.
Someone was talking about, you know, there's so many different accounts and you get lost. Do you have like a template or something that you use or that you recommend, just so that we can stay on top of all that stuff? Because it's true, like sometimes someone was saying, oh, you know, I forgot about this old email account. Like I forget about some things for a few months, and then, you know, so if I'm forgetting, like whoever's executing someday, they're not going to know.
Well, a lot of people ask me, where do you begin? Where do you start? And I made up a sample worksheet, and it's basically just a, you know, a spreadsheet, and anybody can do it. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can be on a piece of notebook paper. It's got to have things like what it is, obviously, the account number, if there's an account number to it, the website where they would find it. You've got to make it so that if I came in and I never met you, that I would be able to sit down and figure out how to access your accounts. So you're going to need a username. You're going to need your password. You're going to need any hints or any other backup information that they provide, any notes. You might even want to put down things like when you closed the account, or a note to the person who's going to help you with this. Close this account after the house sells, because maybe it was an alarm company, or, you know, you can put down what you want to do with each one of these things. If you want your Facebook deleted, put a note in there that says delete after my death. But it doesn't have to be anything fancy. I'm happy to give you the sample digital worksheet. I can make it available to Janet and she can get it to you if you'd like. But basically it's anything. It can be your Amazon account, your bank account, your alarm system at your house, your cell phone account, anything that has a digital footprint. And it doesn't have to be fancy. If you prefer to have it in something like an address book, there are very inexpensive internet address books that you can buy on Amazon or from the bookstore. And basically it's an A through Z guide, and you can store all your passwords in a written address book, and it's made for just that reason. If you want to have a service that you pay for monthly, that's like I mentioned before, 1Password or LastPass are some of them. There's one more that I can't think of off the top of my head. But it looks like they all look like a vault of some sort, and they're basically password vault services. You can put all that information into the vault and have it accessible with just a password. So that makes it very easy for anybody following up after you to gain access. With that 1Password, they have, you know, access to all your passwords. We have a couple of questions, Janet.
Okay. Okay, let's call on Lynn Tejada. If you could unmute, thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for hosting this. And nice to meet you, Sarah. my question is, I'm glad that you guys circled back to the 1Password and things like that, because that was my question. I can certainly see in this context how that could be super helpful for a beloved family member or executor after someone passed away. But my husband has been telling me forever to get on 1Password, because I'm forever like trying to look up and trying to remember all my passwords. But I also have a paranoia, not because I have anything of value to really the outside world, but it is kind of, so I was just asking if you have a personal or professional opinion about the pros and cons of the danger of having a password locker, that if someone did get a hold, like the wrong person did get a hold of the 1Password, then they would have access to everything. So that's kind of scary on the other end. Like it's good on one side and it's bad. Anyway, any deeper thoughts on what you recommend?
Again, it's a person that you trust. It's a person that you know, just like you would give somebody the key to your house. I don't give it to just anybody. I only have certain people that have a key to my house.
Oh, I'm
it's
not
the same
asking.
way with your passwords.
Oh, I'm not
And
asking
it can
that.
be in a secret.
She's asking about if someone hacks it from within a computer.
I'm just saying, do you recommend it or not because of that hackability thing?
You know what? I have to say that my clients, for the most part, have used 1Password, and they've really liked it. They haven't found any problems. Nobody's been hacked. In fact, it heard suggestions. It does these encrypted passwords so that nobody could even possibly replicate them. And I haven't heard of any instances of anybody breaking into their systems. It's the problems that we have are when we have the same password for absolutely every account. When we've got, you know, password 123 for our password, somebody's going to hack into your account.
And one of the other
Thank you.
things that's one of my pet peeves is because I was working with computers before there were computers. And one of the things that used to happen a lot is people would leave I worked in the legal field. I was a corporate trainer. I trained attorneys on a legal database, and they would leave their password open. They would X out, you know, the little X at the top, thinking they've signed out. No, they just simply closed the door, but they didn't shut off the system. And with people having their emails on their phones, on their laptops, they don't sign out of their accounts, which means all of their accounts are still open, and the scammers are just, you know, scanning along and looking for open accounts. So, and I think the technology encourages this now, because they're always like putting a check mark in the box that says you want to save your password. I have clients who cannot sign out of their email because they don't know their password to get in their email. And it just makes me like, oh, like you've got to know your password. We have to log out on your phones. The email systems are kept open. And to me, they're just giving a free pass to all the scammers. So even though you have access to all this stuff on your phone, sign out of every account, your email, your Facebook. Don't leave anything open, because it's just an open door to the hackers. And I think that's where a lot of scams are happening. I know when I was late to getting a smartphone. I think I got maybe 5 years ago. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. I can have my emails come in. Within a couple of days, my email was hacked. I shut them all off. And I just take a few minutes, and when I want to check my email on my phone, I just have to go into the website on the phone, type in my username and my password, and then I sign or log out. But most people are not doing that. And I think that's a real source of problem.
You can also have 1Password on your phone. You can have it on your laptop or your desktop. Or you can have it on an iPad, for example. You can have those passwords at your fingertips, and you don't have to remember them, and you don't have to worry about them for the most part, because one that's got access to that vault. You can. Oh, go right ahead.
Oh, Darren, you had a question, your hand's up?
Oh, I was just gonna make a comment, because I get people asking me that question too about, can they trust one of
Oh,
things, where they put everything in. A lot of people that use them that think they're fine and they like it and they just sort of go on their merry way. But I know that since I'm sort of old school, I actually have like an Excel spreadsheet with all my personal passwords, and I've got a ton of them. I mean, I've got a lot, but I sort them out. You guys will like this, Janet. And I have them sorted by financial, by medical, by rewards programs, different office stuff, whatever. But what I do is I actually save that spreadsheet on my phone. So I always have it in my notes. So if I'm somewhere else, I can get it on my phone. And my sister, who's my main trustee, etc., she knows the secret to get into my phone. So I figured she could always get all my passwords if she doesn't get them from the hard copy that I still have. But I think everybody has to find a way to organize their passwords and logins, and then also to make sure that at least somebody has access to it somewhere. Because I've run into people where their spouse passes and they thought they didn't have any secrets, and they find out that they don't know anything about their accounts. And it's really, really distressing for a newly widowed person to find out that they can't get into these accounts, or they didn't even realize there were these extra accounts. And I have a friend whose husband passed about 6 months ago, and she, by looking at his emails, found out that he had been opening like little stock accounts because he was homesick for a few years. I mean, he was just doing it for the heck of it, but she didn't have the passwords to get in any of them. And she knew there were funds. So I was trying to help her wade through that. But he didn't have them written anywhere. I mean, she just couldn't find the passwords. So I know exactly what you're addressing here. It can be really, really stressful and distressing. Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
And that's just one part of it, the passwords.
Are there any other questions? We're almost
I had a question.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of sad if like it's obviously a very sensitive topic. If your parents are like talking about these things when you feel like this have a long time to live. But I guess at what age or when do you think people should be writing out their wills and saying all these things? And just like, I guess adding to it as new things arise. Like when do you recommend to your clients like writing these things out? I mean, of course you never know, like that guy, the example you gave where he just had a heart attack, but
yeah,
at what point do you recommend is best? Like how early on?
Well, that person that I mentioned earlier, he was not in great health and he lived alone. He was divorced. His kids were grown with their own kids. And, I would have hoped that he would have had things under control. And I honestly suggest that everybody who has any kind of assets have some kind of documents. Even if you don't have a lot of assets, you don't have to own a home. It's nice to have your affairs in order. What do you want to happen to you should you be hospitalized and you can't speak for yourself? Who do you want to take over your finances if you can't do it for yourself? You may not have a lot in finances, but it's nice to have the peace of mind knowing that somebody that you trust is going to be doing that stuff for you. I don't think it's ever too early. You don't have to be a senior citizen. I think I got my first trust in place in my 40s. So I think it's an important thing. It's a gift that you give to the people that you leave behind. It's a roadmap. It really helps the people that you leave behind.
Especially the digital assets. As soon as you set up one online system, whether it's online banking or a dating site or a Facebook account, as soon as you start setting those up, you should be writing those passwords down on a spreadsheet. When you buy a house or you have a lot of money in a bank, then you should be definitely setting up a trust. But even if you're a single person, just with a job, if something happens to you and you go to the hospital, who's gonna be your healthcare directive? Who's gonna talk to the doctor? Who's gonna pay your bills on your mortgage if you're incapacitated? So, it still is really important to set up a power of attorney for financial and health, even maybe before you do the trust for the house. But I know when my kids turned 18, I did powers of attorney for them, because when a child turns 18, a parent can no longer speak or direct health issues at a hospital. So, and none of them owned a house or property at that time, but it was mainly for health reasons that I would be able to speak on their behalf. So it behooves anyone who first sets up a password to start this spreadsheet. Well, we're gone over. Any other questions? You can, if you have any more questions, you can contact me and I can get them to Sarah. If you have any more questions for the attorney, Darren Larson, again, you can direct them to me and then I can put you in touch with Darren. I want to thank all of you for joining tonight. Thank you so much, Sarah. It was such great information. And I hope you'll tune in next month. In the month of May, we have I just blanked. We have a photo organizer. And in June, we have a closet person who designs closet. In July, we're having a photographer talk about getting ready for a photography shoot or an event. So every month I interview an expert in their field about how organizing impacts their field. So thank you very much for coming tonight. This session will be available on my website in a few days if you want to hear it again or share it with a friend. And also next month's email that announces the next month's post will have a link to the recording as well. So good night.